Sean, you're back from the wild, from your hunt, man. How did it go?
It was good. It was, everybody keeps asking me if it was successful, and it was successful in a way that I learned a ton, but didn't get an elk. We weren't able to shoot one. I actually had a chance, should have. And that was one of my learning experiences. And, it's just one of those things where I got my ass handed to me. And, but we did well. We called in a bunch of different bulls, just everything has to go right, man. And like one of the circumstances was I had a bull literally 10 feet away from me, but on the other side of a big giant oak bush. And I mean, you can't shoot through it. And it smelled me and then took off the exact direction through the bush. So by the time I got around it and couldn't stop it, it wouldn't stop to noises or anything. It's just that kind of little stuff. So it was very successful. We got into a bunch. And like I said, learned a ton, excited for the next one. And
At least you had the opportunity, right? Like I think when
yeah.
hunts are like almost depressing is when you didn't even see anything enough to even have a chance.
Oh, that's the
Yep.
worst. Yeah.
But still, right to your point, there's some winning, right? Got up in the mountains and learned and whatever. But at least it's the worst if you never even saw the bull, right? Or you never even saw the buck. Like that just kind of sucks.
Oh,
But
yeah. There's nothing worse than that when you're completely skunked. So we were seeing stuff every day. We were
cool.
getting into things, hiking. I'd average 9 to 10 miles a day, hiking
Oh yeah.
around up and down elevation. So
Yeah.
that part's all good.
Well, welcome back to the real world, man.
Yeah.
Back to the grind. All right. Well, let's
Mm.
get into it. We got questions from the Iron Council. That's our exclusive brotherhood. If you guys haven't looked up the Iron Council, go to orderofman.com/Iron Council to learn more. We are currently accepting and we have open enrollment. That's going to last roughly about 2 weeks. So now's your chance. Get on the path. Join us, orderofman.com/Iron Council. All right. First question, Daniel Garcia, implementing the confidence and competence loop. We chatted before we hit record. I have no idea what this is, so I'm going to be going blind on this one. So, but strategies around implementing the confidence and competent loop.
Well, you have to do it. You have to practice. So the confidence competence loop just has to do with any skill set that you're trying to improve. And with most people, actually, I shouldn't say most people. I think there's a big chunk of people that think that before you do anything, you need to know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And that's not always necessarily true, but you see a lot of people out there that gather knowledge on top of knowledge on top of knowledge, trying to know more before they take any action.
Yeah.
And that doesn't
You
really
just need to
promote
start getting
growth.
the reps. Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's some people that just wing it, and that's not necessarily productive either. But in you're better off though taking some sort of action regardless. And so the competence part comes most of the time in doing. Like we were just mentioning my hunt, right? And kind of the success of that. You can watch any number of videos. And I had this conversation. My buddy, who is a world-class hunter, he he's friends with Rogan and John Dudley and Cam Hanes, and he's hunted with all these guys. And I called him afterwards, and I asked him questions because he's the guy who actually got me into bow hunting. And and I said, dude, I'm looking at these videos, of guys killing, and I did everything exactly the same. I'm just noticing little things. And my one opportunity that I had to take an actual shot, I feel like I messed up. And here's what happened, right? And I tell him this scenario, and he goes, he like very bluntly says, dude, you're a bow hunter. It's hard. It's most of the time. And he kind of explains to me the numbers and the scenarios. And he's like, you're watching videos of kills. Of course you're seeing like,
You didn't see all the video
their
film.
their setups were perfect and all these things. He's like, it sounds like your setups were perfect too. He's just like 100 things have to go right. And that's the way that it is. So he's like, but you have to put in reps. And here's what stood out to me is he told me what happened to him and how he went out on his own and got skunked for 3 years, but he was out 3 weeks at a time, all 3 of those years, before he killed his first bull. And so I'm thinking, I've gone out the last few years, and total time in those few years has maybe been 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And so like I just need reps. I need time. I need, time out in the woods, gaining that experience, gaining those scenarios. And it's like I just talked about, where I failed this time, I learned from that and it'll never happen again. The same thing happened to him. I just need more reps to catch up. And then the second part of this is the fastest way to get through the reps successfully and learn the most is to be able to do what I did, where you can call somebody who has that experience, who has that knowledge, who's been through it, that can walk you through it and help you, assure you that you're on the right path. And so, to me,
That
the
way you don't
combination of
second
both.
guess the path you're going and then pivot when you probably shouldn't be pivoting, and vice versa.
Yeah. So the confidence, here's the thing, my confidence was shot, after going at him like, dude, is it me? Do I have bad luck? Blah, blah, blah. And after talking to him, he's like, no, you're ahead of the curve. Like you're doing things right. If you're getting into elk and if you're, all of these things that you're doing, you're ahead of most of the guys that I know. And he explained to me, he was able to tell me things like he said, hey, I have 15 friends of mine right now that are out elk hunting. He said, and all of them that are on hunts that are like $20,000 to $30,000 hunts have been successful. And all of my other friends who are on DIY hunts, not a single one of them has shot an elk yet.
Yeah.
And so, it was all I had to do was hear that, and that increased my confidence.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Clarity through your coach lets you know that you're on the path, and thus your confidence goes up.
Yes, but we couldn't just have the conversation without me being out there and having the experience for me to connect the dots.
Totally.
So you need both.
Yeah. I like that. I was listening to Andrew Huberman just like the last week, and I don't know if this episode has dropped from him yet, but he did like a little bit of a teaser video around it. And in that video, he talks about how obviously a growth mindset is critical from building up competence and increasing skill set. But when coupled with stress as an enhancer mindset, AKA that it's only through stress that we actually grow as well, in conjunction with the growth mindset, increases performance, increases drastically. And that's kind of what I heard, translation of what you said. The hunt was successful. Why? Because you understand that the stress and the frustration and the difficulty that you went through is part of the growth process. And it's ironic. I was talking about with someone about this last week, how as humans, we seek comfort in all things. It's always like, if anyone said, oh, paint the picture of perfect life, it doesn't include stress. But yet it is the way of growth. But we all try to avoid it. And so I think the clarity of the idea that, hey, for me to get good at jiu-jitsu, I can't watch YouTube videos alone. Ultimately, in the end, I need mat time.
Yeah.
And when I get discouraged because I just got my butt handed to me over and over again on the mat, I have to remind myself that is through the reps and the stressful process that it connects. And he talks about this, which I thought was profound, is through the stress, it prepares the brain to receive knowledge and learning and rewiring of synapses. The stress is almost required for the change to stick. And It's not in comfort that we actually evolve and change. And you know how Huberman is. He gets all like nerds out, right, on the whole chemical side of things. But I just find it fascinating that we need to put ourselves in difficult circumstances to be able to learn.
And he actually says that in the question, how does this concept apply to our daily tasks? And I think that's the key, is your daily tasks need to include practice in whatever it is. Too many people, their daily tasks are studying whatever it is, or gaining knowledge on whatever it is, or, but it's the actual practice and then the reps of doing. Most of your most significant practice, unfortunately, is going to be in hands-on.
Yep.
And if you're in sales, it's going to be in front of clients. You learn how to sell by being in front of more clients more than going to sales seminars, right?
Yeah, totally.
You'll learn techniques, just like watching the YouTube videos for jiu-jitsu. You might learn a technique, or you might learn a different way of doing something, but until you're on the mats with somebody, you're not going to feel what works and what doesn't.
Well, and this is why people, we go through the educational system, we go to school, we go to university, and then we come into the workplace, and then we think, oh, employee development, or, oh, I need to go to that seminar, Sean. Oh, I need to go to these things. And don't get me wrong, they have their benefits, but it's the 70, what do they call it? The 70-20-10 rule. 70% of skill increase is actually on the job. It is actually in the reps. 20% is informal conversations and just processing things. And only 10% is from a formal lecturing perspective. 10, that's it. So, man, this is about grinding, getting the reps in, and realizing it's okay, because that's the other part, right? You don't want to beat yourself up. Back to your point, you can get the reps in, but if you walk away coming back from this hunt like down and out, and like, oh my gosh, what did I do wrong or whatever, and that's where the coaching comes in, because you're like, all right, no, I'm on path. I'm doing what I should be doing. I'm okay. This is just, I'm going in the right direction. I need to continue those reps. And that's where those coaches become critical to us, I think.
And that's where the confidence comes from, because it's kind of like baseball, right? If you look at baseball, and the numbers are so low to make it into the Hall of Fame. You're failing 70% of the time, and you can make it into the Hall of Fame as a hitter. And so if you know those numbers, then all the strikeouts, all the unsuccessful at bats they don't break your confidence as much, understanding that, but you're not going to get it without doing.
Yeah. And we could even talk about, like, this is where comparison is dangerous and everything else, right? Because we're not understanding all the reps that people are putting in. That's some good stuff. All right. Steve Marshall. I'm a man who likes solitude. I grew up in the woods and I lived there for most of my life. I also travel for work. One of my biggest issues is, how do you balance out your alone time in a relationship or marriage? In my relationships, most of the women I've dated don't understand when I tell them I need alone time. They immediately think I'm up to something scandalous.
Well, so it sounds like he's not married. And so I think that is just going to come in time with finding the right woman. And not sneaking around. I think a lot of men, we don't know we're doing it
ahead of time.
Yeah. We don't know we're doing it, but we tend to sneak around because you kind of, quote unquote, know what they're going to say. If you ask to go do, whatever it is that you want to go do on your own.
So you just go bell out instead. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the more open your communication is with what you're doing, then they should be less suspicious. Now, if you are communicating well and it's obvious, and, where you're at is clear, and they still suspect you, then that's on them.
Yeah.
Right. But if they are thinking that way, most likely it's a lack of communication on your end. That's my thought from the hip. What do you think there?
Same. And you do you. right, Steve? Like, don't be a nice guy here and go like, this is really important to me. And it's like, oh, well, I'm going to have to. No, like this isn't, if it's important, you need your alone time. I agree. Just communicate up front, make sure that they're aware that, and express yourself. Why? Why, Steve? Why is this important to you? And how is it going to benefit her? You know, when I have my alone time, I'm able to clarify some things. I reduce some stress. This is important to me. Communicate those things, right? Don't make all these assumptions that they understand you. So just communicate up front, and then wait for the woman that it works out okay. I mean, because some of that I immediately too, like, you don't want these relationships that are instantly jumping to scandalous whenever like you're not around. That's not a good sign, right? And it's also not a good sign if you're in a relationship with a woman that's like absolutely needs you around at all times for her to feel fulfilled and happy. So, you know, maybe your alone time issue is really a benefit as a way of kind of filtering out some potential relationships that may not work for you.
Mm. You know, it's, and in saying that, you kind of, I think everybody wants to have their cake and eat it too, in a sense that we're looking for the perfect woman, quote
Yeah.
unquote, which doesn't
Yeah.
exist.
Yeah.
So there's always going to be some give and take, but on the front end, especially when you're dating, there's certain deal breakers, right? There's red flags. And I was just talking to a friend who he just broke up with a girlfriend, with a woman he was seeing, and he was telling me that when they broke it off, he almost felt relieved. You know, I'm like, well, that's an obvious flag
Yeah.
that, you know, it
Yeah.
wasn't right.
Good call. Yeah.
Um, but if we're feeling that tension and that sense of, you know, as we're dating somebody, you know, then that should be pretty clear. If you are being upfront, you're saying, hey, I need this alone time and whatever, and there's still stress, I mean, then that's a good sign that it probably break it off earlier is better, you know. And but it's easy also to get, if everything else is comfortable, or, you know, you like all these other things, you have to look at that. How important is your alone time? How important is that to you? Is that the deal breaker? You know, and if so, you know, the earlier the better. And if not, if it's something that's where you can do the give and take, right? Then maybe you have to, but that's up to you to decide.
Yeah.
But I
One
think
thing's for
most of it,
sure.
like you said, is the communication is the key.
One thing for sure. Anything difficult now while dating is not going to get easier after you get married. So, you know,
No, it's
don't
only
fall
going
into
to
that
get
trap.
more difficult for
Yeah.
sure. You know, but
All right.
that's why I prefaced it though with
Yeah.
the, you know, everyone has there's no perfect scenario, man. Anybody who says, oh, I met so and so and it's just been like, they're lying in some capacity. Like everything's hard, every relationship is hard, you know,
Requires
every
work.
dynamic is difficult. So you know, it's never going to be perfect, but you can get most of the things that you're looking for.
Yeah. All right. Stacy Bauer, how to manage the new wife and stepkids? Not new, actually, just not the mother of my son. It's our last kid in the house, my kid, getting him to college, but also trying to keep her happy. How do you manage the both sides? All right, I got to read that again.
That one's confusing to me because it almost sounds like he had a kid before getting married with stepkids, but then he's saying the last kid is his kid. So it almost seems like backwards in a sense.
Yeah, it's our last kid in the house, and it's his kid, trying to get him off to college. And you said a new wife, right? So
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 maybe the
she
stepkids are
has some
older.
stepkids, he has an older kid, and he has a new wife. How do I manage? How do you manage both sides of that?
Hmm. You know,
All right, Stacey, next time, man, you got to give us some more, like, where's the struggle at, right? Because, like, the first thing that crosses my mind here is manage both sides. What do you mean? You know how many hats we all wear? How do I manage boss, employee, husband, father, son, yeah, friend, right? Like, we're all managing a lot of sides. So where's the
Mhm.
conflict at, right? What's the issue?
Yeah, it would definitely need a little more context. And again, it comes down to communication.
Yeah.
Communication, planning, scheduling. If you're managing anything, I'm just going to deal with the question: how do you manage both? It's you plan everything in so that you make it work by scheduling, planning, communicating who needs what, who needs to be where, what, needs to be handled in your household, regardless of what it is. Just increase communication, planning, scheduling. That's where my brain goes
Totally.
anyways.
Totally. Well, and part of me hears this too. Maybe there's a lack of alignment, right? Well, this is my kid. I'm trying to get him off to college, but I have my wife and her kids. No, 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 that doesn't work. You're a team. You got married. So now your kid and him going off to college is her responsibility as much as it is yours, and her stepkids is your responsibility as much as hers. So make sure that you guys are not, it's not the right term, but like kind of dividing and conquering, but to the extent of like, that's not my responsibility. That's dangerous. Don't do that. So get on the same page. If you need to communicate to her what you're stressed out about, let her know and come up with a plan, enroll her in what you're trying to do, and do the same thing. Hey, honey, your stepkids, what's our game plan here? What do we need to improve as a parenting unit to show up more powerfully for our kids? You guys got to make sure that you're aligned. I don't know if that's in here, but there's a sense of that as part of this. So make sure that you guys have some alignment as well.
Yeah, nothing to add. I just think there needs to be a little more clarity in that
Context.
question.
Yeah. All right. John Preston, how do you approach the topic of death with someone whose health is extremely poor? My father currently has stage 4 prostate cancer and was also diagnosed with bladder cancer this week. We've had several conversations about his health, but his concerns are more focused on his wife, who is dealing with
esophageal
cancer and is currently on chemo. It seems like my father spends most of his energy and attention on his wife rather than focus on himself. I don't know how much longer I have with him. Now, before I turn it over to you, Sean, there's some parallels that we see in all areas of life, right? This idea of he's spending more attention and the energy and attention on his wife than on his own health. I think this is, for everybody listening, this is a transcendent question, regardless of, the more extreme example that John's giving.
I dealt with this with my mom when she was going through her cancer situation. It was so difficult watching her struggle, watching her suffer. I mean, literally suffering. She had a big hole in her face. It was awful to watch. And then all of the, looking back, I talked to my sister about it because there's things that we thought she should have done maybe, or could have done earlier, that ironically she didn't want to do because she didn't want to affect the way her face looked and everything else. And then, ironically it got really bad anyways. And so in hindsight, we could say, yeah, man, we told her to do this, or we wanted her to do this, but at the end of the day, it was still her choice. Yeah. We couldn't be the ones to make the choice for her. She had to go with her gut and what felt right. And with things like cancer, you just never know anyways, right? We all know people who've been diagnosed with stage 4 and overcome it. And we know people that have been diagnosed with stage 4 and 2 weeks later, they're gone. And so I think personally, the focus for you, instead of trying to get your dad to focus on himself, especially with his wife going through, what she is. And I'm assuming that's a stepmom because he didn't say his mom, right? He said his wife. It is that in his life is the most important thing to him. And so what I would say is you support that and love him, and any feelings you have, any things you want to say, any conversations you feel like could be missed if he passes, I would take action in starting to have those right away and being around or with or in conversation with him as much as you possibly can. And instead of the focus being on what you think he should do, just have real conversations about, how you love him, what you learn from him, how you support, him, and do it that way, honestly. Um, because if you think you have less time, I think our biggest regrets come in saying, I wish I would have said dot dot dot, or it's I don't know. That's my thoughts. What are
Totally.
you thinking there with that?
I've had several conversations. Awesome. You brought him up. Now let it go. Like, it's not surprising, right, on this podcast that we would ever say, like, oh, I'm trying to change someone. And our answer is always going to be, yeah, good luck with that. Let us know how that turns out, because it doesn't work, right? We don't change people. We don't coerce people. We know, and we promote this idea that it's through agency and freedom of choice that people have the greatest growth and opportunity in their life. He's making a conscious choice. His wife's more important than his health. Not surprising. I'm not sure if I'd choose any different. Would you, Sean? Right? Like,
No.
there's a point where, like, yeah, you're going to choose certain things, right? And maybe he's more tentative or more present to his mortality more than anything else. And guess what? It's not that important. And you've done your part of, hey, Dad, this is important. I think you should be concerned about his health. Check. Awesome. Duly noted. Now stop using that against him, if you are, and just support him with what is most important. And what's most important is his wife. So how do you help him there?
And I totally get it. Obviously, he loves his dad and he doesn't want to lose him. And so that's the underlying thing, that with that emotion, that's what guys do. We just try and fix everything, right? Like, Dad,
Yeah.
you should do this. But I think focus the energy towards making sure you have no regrets
Yeah.
in expressing your feelings and gratitude for him and
Totally.
who he is while
Now,
you have the time.
in the spirit of Dad's situation, if Dad was listening to the podcast, then we would also be saying, hey, Dad, you can show up more powerfully for your wife when we're healthy.
Yes.
And so that's the lesson for all of us, is be careful that we don't use excuses for taking care of ourselves and going, oh, well, you know what, it's all about the family and it's all about these other things, and be ignorant to the idea that some of the best ways that we can show up for our family, for our wives, for our kids, is by taking care of our health, by having the energy necessary to give our energy to them. And if we're spent because our bodies are out of shape, if we're not taking care of our minds and everything, then all our energy is wasted at work. And then what is our families getting? The leftovers, the complete leftovers. And by the way, Sean, there's a little bit of a tangent, but like, I like that distinction, this energy. I really like that. Like, I've always been like, oh, show up at work strong, show up at home strong, do all these things to the fullness. But it's almost kind of energy management. I only have so much energy in the day. And so the question you have to be asking yourself is, where are you giving that energy to, or what are you giving that energy to? And is it being distributed appropriately? Or is your wife and kids getting the leftovers or virtually nothing from you by the time you get home? And that energy could be where you're spending it, but it's also about how we're taking care of our bodies so we can serve and give them the necessary energy, or the energy that they deserve.
I like it.
Okay. Anything else for the dad?
No, I mean, I would say if they haven't, and especially in this situation, if it, like I said, it sounds like a stepmom.
Yeah.
Also be willing to have the conversation with him that if, let's say he does pass, and she doesn't, or he does before her or whatever, that you have the conversation with him, asking whether or not his financial affairs are in order, and whether he has things set up, whether it's a trust or something like that, that's going to do what he wants with his estate, accordingly. because, in any, I mean, that's important in any family, but especially in a split family, that, there may be some things that he wants with his kids. I don't know if she has kids, right? And different things there that assets wise, it's going to be an uncomfortable and awkward conversation if you haven't had it before. But I think that would be an important thing to bring up as well, just to make sure that anything that he wants that he's probably not thinking about, right, in these moments, is carried out correctly and accordingly.
And that's going to give him reduce stress, right? Actually having that conversation and kind of processing that and dealing with what is so I think that's spot on. And time flies, man. Like you'll think you have time, you'll be like, oh, his health is good, and then it could be 2-day difference, and all of a sudden there's that conversation is lost. I mean, my dad literally just went into the hospital just to like get checked in on, and within a week it was like drastic difference, right? Like there's no consistent, strong, powerful conversation. It was done. Like the window was closed. And you just don't know how quick that's going to go. All right, Jamie Hacknett, how should I approach a woman at the
what,
gym?
real quick. Sorry. I just had one thing. For some guys, we can't bring up the conversation. And I saw this with my brother and sister. I talk to my mom all the time. And sorry to jump back into this question, but this is something I found very powerful and helpful. I found, my wife found this book basically that you can write to a loved one, like all the memories, things you love about them, appreciate them. I literally filled out this notebook, wrote out my favorite memories growing up, things I learned from her, things I appreciate about her. Found a book that said, when this happened, ... when I was a kid, I remember most about you, ... And it's kind of like the memories that you have of loved ones that you want to tell them, but you just like to have the conversation is hard for you. So sometimes it's easier for people to write it down. So do that, and I don't know if you have siblings, but I can tell you this, I did it and I wrote it out and gave it to my mom, and she read it and loved it and appreciated it. But I also gave one to my brother and one to my sister to do, and neither one of them did it, and both of them regret it.
Yeah.
And they had literally like a year to get it done and never did it, and kept thinking like, oh yeah, I'll get to that. Oh yeah, I'll get to that. And I even reminded them, hey, did you fill that thing out for mom yet? Did you do that thing for mom yet? Yeah. I'm going to do it. And none of them did it, neither one of them. And it's one of their big regrets they have, is like, dang it. Why didn't I fill that thing out? So whatever the communication is, the point is like, just don't put it off. Make sure you get it done, and make sure you have no regrets when it's done.
And follow.
Sorry to jump back in.
No, it's okay. No, and follow your heart. If your heart's telling you to do something, just do it, even if it doesn't logically make sense. One of my last personal visits with my dad, so it was kind of is interesting. His cognitive abilities were going away. So I like go in there, I'm like, hey dad, how you doing? And he's like, good. I'm like, so how was today? And then like mid-sentence, he's just like staring off in Wonderland, stop talking to me.
Yeah.
And I'd sat there for about like an hour, and then all of a sudden he's like, oh, you drive all the way down from Salt Lake? I'm like, oh yeah. And I start talking to him, and then all of a sudden he's checked out. I'm like, oh man. So it's almost like I have these little windows. And so when he was sitting there, I was like, man, I gotta go, after I was there for a few hours. And the thought crossed my mind. I'm like, man, I should give my dad a blessing. And the counter to that was what? He's not going to understand.
He won't want it. Yeah.
He won't want it. He doesn't know. Right. Like I had all these things, but my heart was saying what? Give your dad a blessing. And so sometimes we have to be unreasonable, right? It's like, well, that doesn't make sense. Well, who gives a crap if it makes sense? Right. If your heart's telling you to do something, then do it. And it was one of my non-regrets. One of the things that I didn't want to do because I didn't think it would be valuable. And so I gave my dad a blessing. And what is that, right? Him hearing me do what? Express my love and appreciation and affection for him,
Mm-hmm.
pleading to God for him. And ironically enough, when I ended that blessing, sorry, he was like, he said amen and said thank you, right? And so I was like, so he heard. So, geez, I don't think I've ever cried on the podcast. So that's always.
Well, I'm glad we got there because that shows how important this is.
Yeah.
It's not something to take lightly. And it's more important than you wanting him to be healthy.
Yeah, totally. All right. In a more serious note, Jamie's curious. How should I approach a woman at the gym that I'm interested in, Sean?
Dude, I have no idea. The hard part is at the gym, they get hit up all the time. I mean, we watch it happen, right? And it's never not awkward. So honestly, I think maybe your best bet is just starting some sort of conversation of like, hey, you know, I see you in here a lot. And
what a crappy place to hit up on someone.
Dude, it's the worst. It's the worst place. It really is the worst place. But if it's the only place you see them, say, hey, you know, I see you in here a bunch. I know this is the worst place to approach somebody, you know, and I don't know if you have a boyfriend, if you're in a relationship or not. Would you be interested in maybe getting coffee or something? That's the only thing that I could think of, honestly. I think it's a hard, dude, because if we were to pick the top three worst places to try and like meet somebody, that's top three worst right there.
Well, and I've been out of the game too long. I don't even know what I
Me
would
too.
say. How's this? I mean, Americans were good at this, and I'm realizing this is a little bit more of an American thing than like European, but even the small chit chat, you know, like, hey, have a great workout. Like, eventually, especially if you're consistent, you know each other, right? Like, it's kind of like an unspoken relationship is being formed because you see each other. And you can make small talk a little bit, like, oh, what do you got today? You got legs, you know, or whatever. And slowly have those conversations. But God, man, that's got to be the worst scenario to try to like let someone know that you're interested in them.
Yeah, even if it's awkward, like here's the thing. I think that's a good point. If you see them all the time, just first thing, maybe say, hey, you know what? I see you in here all the time. My name's, you know, Jamie. What's your name? You know, and just start there, right? Shake her hand and be like, okay, cool. Now when I see you, it's not like this awkward, like, you know, lady I see in the gym. Now I can say, hey, what's up, Sarah? You know, and whatever, and just leave it at that, right? Like that could be your whole opening conversation. Who knows if that leads into more conversation or not? But then next time you see her, you know, then you can be like, hey, Sarah, how you doing today? You know, and have a good workout or whatever. And
I think that's sound advice, right? What you don't want, just don't be the creepy dude. That's like, I don't know. Like, don't say, hey, can I spot you on your squats? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Yeah, good luck. Dude, Jamie, don't ask us. We don't know. Maybe
we have no idea.
Ryan's on the market, so maybe he has better insights nowadays. But
I think he's using online stuff more, right? That's yeah, I don't know, man.
You know, wear tank tops more to the gym, Jamie, and yell out your reps. You know, and so if you're doing like 15 reps, like go 10 quiet, and then the last 5 you go like 30, 31, you know, and just like breathe really hard. That's what I'd go for. You know,
no, it's the when you're on 15, you're like 132, 133.
Yeah, cut off jean shorts so your thighs are showing. Dude, just go all out. See how it goes. Good luck. All right, Craig Miller. How do you motivate others to be invested in their work? A couple people I manage don't seem to be meeting their full potential. Their work is sloppy and rushed. I've asked for feedback if they are too busy and provided them the corrections to their work in order to create a clear standard. Question. Good question.
Yeah, I mean, you would be better suited to answer this because most of the coaching and that I'm doing is with entrepreneurs, and so they're here's
mindset. Yeah.
Here's the thing though, they're really not. You'd be surprised whether they're employees
or Greg wants this employee to have your entrepreneurial mindset, right? But I think there's some correlation there.
Most people, regardless of what you're doing, whether employees or entrepreneurs, honestly, don't meet their full potential. Yeah. They don't put in the effort. They don't get invested in their work. They don't take ownership of it. They don't try to be their best. And a lot of it is habits. And so I think the biggest key I could say is start recognizing them for what they are doing right. And like preface every conversation with what they're doing right and what they're doing well. And then get in the conversation of what you'd like to see them do more of. And then if there's other people in your office that are doing those things that you'd like them to be doing more of, you praise those people in front of everybody.
Yeah.
And make sure that people are seeing you recognize for the things that you want them to do more of. Not to say that they'll even start doing it, but that's one good thing that does help in that. And like I said, you see this more from an employee standpoint, Kip. What's your experience there?
Yeah. So there's a couple, and I'll try not to I could nerd out on this, right? Probably too long. So I'll try to make this quick. So Greg, make sure that your mindset is clear. And this is the suggestion that I would say to anybody that's leading people. Your job as a leader is to clarify expectations of what is winning. Be super clear at what winning is, and we invite people to make that commitment. That's it. So then the question then is, why aren't they meeting expectation? And your job is to determine what it is and support them in meeting those expectations. Now, with that said, we want them fully committed and engaged on what we're about and what winning is. They got to be fully committed. And so you might say, well, Kip, what does fully committed look like? They take ownership. They're enthusiastic. They're positive. They're excited. They bring their heart and their soul to the table, not just their work, right? Like that's the kind of mindset you want. But we got to be really clear. Most leaders fail in this space because they're not clear in communicating the expectation, right? And we micromanage the behavior and the action and not the results. So for instance, what's the actions and behaviors? Things getting done. That's where I hear work is sloppy and rushed. Yep, I got it done. I got it done. I got it done. Are we managing things getting done, or are we managing the outcome of those things getting done? And do they know what the outcome is? Are they bought into the outcome? Do they understand why sloppy rush work, the impact of it? Or are we managing their behavior, assuming that they see the strategic results of that, and we think that they'll make that connection on their own? And then most importantly, do you know why it's sloppy and rushed? Are you overloading what you've given them? Do they feel like it's impossible to do X amount of work, so they rush it and it's sloppy because of that? Like, we got to get really clear. One, what is winning? Two, why is there a gap? And are they fully committed and engaged in executing that way? And if they are, then guess what? It's back on us. All right, what am I not doing? Where are we out of alignment where your work being sloppy and rushed is okay in your mind? Well, Kip, this is next to impossible. You keep giving us all this stuff. I'm like running around with my head cut off. You have me on this other project. It's taken away from the quality of work. Okay, got it. Right. So we got to get really clear. And I don't think this is everything I've just said is not really a motivation thing. This is actually clarity around expectations more than anything else. Now, if we were going to ask the question just about how do you motivate and inspire people, here's your answer to those. you need to be inspired. Are you walking around excited, enthusiastic about the work that you're doing? If you're not, you're in zero position to inspire other people. So you got to be on that path first. 2, create a sense of team belonging and purpose. Are they clear their role within the team and the bigger organization and what it means? And have you communicated it in a way that they can get behind it and get excited about it? And then how's the relationships? Here's the other rub. I had this call with actually someone in the Iron Council. It was a couple of years ago. And he's like, oh, it was a mentor. My battle team leader's not like making the necessary pivots. I've told him what he needs to do and he's not correcting it, whatever. Okay. And I said, are you in a position of influence with him? Yeah, I give him sound advice, blah, blah, blah. And I go, how's his wife? How's his kids? Oh, I don't know. Then you're not in a position of influence. The reality of it is, if you are a leader, your people need to know that you genuinely care for them and that you understand their challenges, their needs, and their desires. Otherwise, all you are is you're managing their work and you're noise and frustrating. So you got to make sure your people get that you actually genuinely care and you see them before you start going and correcting them. Okay, I didn't go off tangent, but there's some stuff to consider there, Greg.
No, that was great. And then sometimes people just aren't going to be motivated. I tell people dealing with independent contractors and them trying to scale their business, and as they're recruiting, and I'm sure you see it in your business too. You don't motivate people, quote unquote, as much as it's better to find motivated people.
Totally. And that's what I like about what I just said. Your job is to clarify what is winning. And I say, hey, Sean, are you down? This is how hard it's going to be. This is what's expected. I'll support you in it, but you got to be all in. Are you all in? And you say yes. And then 2 years later, hey, are you still all in? No, I'm not. Then you don't belong here. It's that simple, right? We deal with humans. We don't rob their agency and don't coerce and shame people into performing. We invite them and we support them, right? And if they're unwilling to do the work and they're not committed to the idea, then they don't belong.
Yeah.
And then you go find a job with your competitor for them instead.
I like it.
Brett Huber, my wife recently told me about some minor plastic surgery that she'd like to have done on her face. By default, I assured her that she looks great and that I can't even see this thing that concerns her, even when she's pointed it out to me. And he says, this is 100% true. I feel like any surgery is an unnecessary risk and expense, even if it's minor, but I regret my response. How should I have responded in order to address her concern better, but not encourage the surgery? Basically, how do we validate feelings that others have that we don't agree with? Good question.
Ooh, that's a really good question and a hard one. I know I've failed at this a bunch of times because, I mean, here's the thing. When we're in a healthy relationship with our spouse, especially, we're going to be attracted to them.
Yeah.
And if we fall out of attraction, we tend to, if they have suggestions for themselves to look better, we tend to be more on board, I think. Like, oh yeah, heck yeah, get that done. That sounds great, but if you're already attracted to them and you feel like you're winning in that area and you're perfectly fine with the way that they look, I think any change you're going to be reluctant in. And so but they don't want to hear that. They just want to hear that you support, like if it's a thing that's going to help them and their confidence. I think maybe the more important thing is to have the conversation of how they're feeling about why they need to have that surgery and how she feels when she looks at herself in the mirror. And if that really bothers her, then be supportive. You can be supportive with I that's awesome. And I hope it increases your confidence. I just want you to know, like, if you're doing it because you think it bothers me, or that's a non-issue for me.
Yeah.
That man, I just love the way you look, everything about you there. I had one not as extreme with this with my wife. She wanted to get Invisalign, and her teeth were crooked, and but I loved that they were crooked. I thought it was cute. Like, I thought it was one of her endearing things, like the way
Yeah.
that they were crooked and stuff. And she never liked it. She was self-conscious about it and always wanted to get them fixed. And I had to get to a place where she was literally getting mad, like, well, I'm going to get this done. And I'm like, I finally just said, why am I fighting this? Like, to myself, this is something she feels strongly about. And instead I said, awesome. That's great. I'm going to honestly kind of miss your little crooked teeth, but I love that it's important to you, and whatever you need as far as support, I'm behind you.
Totally.
And so,
And I think that's really what we're saying, right? Like, his ultimate question here is, how should I have responded in order to address her concern better? So it's called listening and just understanding it, right? Like, okay, I understand, and I can have empathy in regards to how you feel. And then he says, basically, how do I validate feelings that others have that we don't agree with? We don't. Like, you can say, hey,
yeah, you
this is
can't
beautiful.
validate it.
I love your example, right? Like, hey, this is a non-issue for me, babe. Right? I think you look beautiful the way you are. I don't personally see it. And we might give a little bit of counsel, like, I just want to make sure this is something that you're not going to regret. You know what I mean? And we're not acting in the moment and whatever. But you can't, if my internal dialogue through the way I was raised, if my internal story is I'm unlovable, that doesn't go away just because Sean goes, oh, Kip, you are.
Yeah.
Now,
Or,
don't
I
get me
love you,
wrong,
Kip.
it helps, but that's still my story. We're
Mm-hmm.
not we're not going to help people deal with that. If anything, the strongest way that we help people deal with that is to help them understand it's their story and that they're aware of it, that that's a default way of seeing the world or seeing themselves. So they realize that it's actually not the teeth, that's not these other things, but it's actually a combination of defining moments when they're younger and all these, so help them understand it's a story and an interpretation. But the breakthrough of that it's not for us to determine. Don't get me wrong, we don't just go, oh, you're feeling down about yourself, deal with it, it's your story. It's like, no, we let people know how we feel and we help them navigate those waters a little bit. But if that's how they feel, that's how they feel. And
Yeah.
having empathy and understanding is really all that we can do.
Yeah. The second part of that, Brett, I would say, is don't don't look at it, at the circumstances. How should I have responded? I think that's a unhealthy way to go about it, because you already responded.
Yeah, so
And
now
so
deal
don't
with your
worry about
reality.
what you said, right?
Yeah.
Worry about um what you're going to do next
Yeah.
instead. It's
Yeah.
that I think too many people get caught up in, well, I screwed that up. I mean, we're men, we're going to screw it up most of the time. you know with especially with our partners. And so instead, be willing to open up the conversation again, and say, I'm sorry in how I responded initially. Maybe I wasn't sensitive. Not Don't even say maybe. Say, I wasn't sensitive in how you were feeling.
In
Can
hindsight, I
we have
really
a
felt like I responded incorrectly or not
yeah,
clearly enough. And so let me provide clarity. Yeah,
yeah, and can we have a conversation about how you feel, so I can support you appropriately?
totally. And just this is great, right? This is reps, right? This is like, oh man, me navigating water. You being naive to this and just going, oh, it is what it is. That's what we don't want. right? And so you're doing exactly the perfect thing, right? And we're going to make mistakes and we pivot and we adjust, we provide clarity of communication. So the fact that you're even asking this question and making sure that you handle it the most effective way possible is perfect. Right? That's part of life. All right, man. Should we wrap up? So key
Yeah.
things, key takeaway. Iron Council is open for the next a week or so until this end of this month. If you're going to join us in the Iron Council, go to orderofman.com/Iron Council to learn more. As always, connect with Mr. Mickler on Twitter and Instagram, on X and Instagram at Ryan Mickler. And if you haven't joined us on Facebook, join us there at facebook.com/group/Order of Man. Any closing remarks, Sean?
Nope. It's going to be the last time for this year to get in. I would get in now. Don't wait till last minute to start trying to plan for next year. Get in now, get ahead of the curve. And
Totally. I mean, the way I always feel about New Year's things, just imagine that if you had a 3-month head start on your New Year's plans. So
yep,
get on the path now. Don't wait.
with support.
With support. Yeah, totally. All right. Until Friday field notes, take action and become the man you were meant to be.